A quick review of everything we saw. We started with rectangles. I'm going to do a rectangle. We also saw parallelograms, right? Like number 28. Squares, we saw squares, but squares are the same thing as a rectangle. So we saw rectangles, we saw parallelograms, we saw triangles, and then we also saw trapezoids. So let's do a quick review of all of these. Rectangles or squares, let me find the area of each. I'm going to find a 90-degree corner. In my case, I'm looking at this corner. I'm going to multiply the two numbers that meet at that corner. So I'm looking at 9 and 9. So I'm going to multiply those two measurements. Rectangles and squares are done the same way. 9 times 9 is 81. So that's the area of my rectangle. Then we saw parallelograms, which I said treat them like a rectangle. Look for a 90-degree corner. It's right there. The two measurements that make that corner are 3.8 and 9.1. So for this case, I'm going to go 3.8 times 9.1. And I get 34.58. My instructions, it just says find the area. It doesn't say anything about rounding, so I'm not rounding. If it said round it to the nearest tenth, 34.6. Okay, now question number 29, triangles. I look at the 90-degree corner and I start thinking, all right, for the 90-degree corner is made by 3.8 and 9. So I'm going to start by multiplying 3.8 times 9. But if I multiply those, that gives me the area of a rectangle. A triangle, we talked about this in the lecture, a triangle is half of a rectangle. So whatever I get, I'm going to divide this by 2. So I'm going to go 3.8 times 9 and then divide this by 2. My answer is 17.1. A triangle is half of a rectangle. So don't forget that dividing by 2. And then we move into trapezoids. I look for the two bases, the two sides that are parallel. So in one of my parentheses, I'm going to go 1.9 plus 5.9. I add the bases, and I want to multiply this by height divided by 2. We can see the height is 3.4. So 3.4 divided by 2. Now 1.9 plus 5.9 is 7.8. Let me call this first parenthesis 7.8. This other parenthesis, let me call it 3.4 divided by 2. Some of you guys might call it 1.7. I'm just going to leave it as that. So I'm just going to go 3.8 times 3.4 divided by 2. All of this is 13.26. Again, it doesn't say to round, so 13.26. If it said rounded to the nearest tenth, 13.3. Then I move on into, let's use the formulas. Find the missing measurement. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. I'm looking at a rectangle. I'm looking at this 90-degree angle is made by 2 and x. Remember the question mark, I always call it x. I know on a rectangle, I have to multiply those two numbers. So 2 times x, and it's equal to the area, which in this case, 14. It says find the missing measurement, so basically solve for x. The opposite of times is divide. So let me divide by 2, because that way those 2's cancel out. I get the x by itself. 14 divided by 2 is 7. If I get a decimal, in this case, round your answer to the nearest tenth, which means 1 decimal place. All right, let's take a look at here, number 32. That's a parallelogram. I look at my 90-degree angle is made by x. Again, that's an x, and 11. So I have to go x times 11. That's equal to the area, which is 63.8. To get x by itself, let me divide by 11, because that way x gets by itself. Now 63.8 divided by 11 is 5.8. If I have to round just one decimal place, then we move into triangles. I see the 90-degree angle is made by x and 4. But that question mark, let's call it x. So I know I have to go x times 4 divided by 2. Remember the triangles, I have to divide it by 2 because a triangle is half of a rectangle. So x times 4 divided by 2 is equal to the area, which is 8.4. Couple of things I can do here. First thing, let me get rid of fractions. So let me multiply both sides by 2. I'm just going to go x times 4 equals 8.4 times 2 is 16.8. And then let me divide by 4, right? Because divide is the opposite of times. So those 4's cancel out. 16.8 divided by 4 is 4.2. Okay, so x equals 4.2. Not too bad. Then we talk about trapezoids. Let me look at the bases, the two sides that are parallel. Have to add my bases, 3.7 plus 11.9. This other parenthesis, I'm going to do height divided by 2, which is x divided by 2. You guys can tell I don't know the height, so I'm going to call it x. And all of this is equal to the area, which is 23.4. For my two parentheses, let me work the one that I can. So 3.7 plus 11.9. So let me call this 15.6 times x over 2 is equal to 23.4. Let me divide both sides by 15.6. Let me cancel this parentheses here. So I have x over 2 is equal to, let's see, 23.4 divided by 15.6 is 1.5. Okay. Now the fraction means division. The opposite of times is divide. So that means the opposite of divide is times. Let me multiply both sides by 2. So these 2's cancel out. And I get x equals 1.5 times 2 is 3. So x equals 3. Let me zoom out. That should be good for your test tomorrow, for your quiz.